Good morning, Dave Baldwin here with our Introverts in Business podcast. This is episode number 5, and today we're going to talk about how to build confidence if you're starting your own business. This podcast is brought to you by the Center for Excellence, and the founder of the Center for Excellence, Dan Scala, is joining us here again this morning, along with Martin Brossman, professional success coach. And we got a really meaty topic again today, so I'm looking forward to diving right in here. Confidence is a really important topic, and there's a couple of different aspects that we're going to look at today. There's competence, which is actually being good at something, versus there's confidence, which is the ability to project the image of being good at something. And I think they're both equally important. And for introverts, this is especially a problem because I've known a lot of people throughout my career that have fallen into two different traps. One, I know a lot of people that are brilliant at what they do, really good at things, and not necessarily able to project the confident image, and they don't necessarily find the best opportunities, don't make as much money. And I've also known people that, frankly, are horrible at what they do, but their such ability to produce confidence, project confidence is so good that they're able to convince people that they're good at things, and that that actually in some ways can even be more powerful to look like you're good at something than to actually be good at it, is one of the observations that I've made. But I want to definitely hear some perspectives from Martin and Dan on this important topic this morning. And particularly, there's a couple of things that I really am looking forward to diving into. There's two important questions as I see it. They're fundamental to this whole thing. The first question that's always on the back of my mind is, how good do I actually have to be at something before I can legitimately say I'm good at it? And B, even when you are good at something, when I am good at something, there's a point where you have to go through this learning curve, so to speak, of developing that confidence when you don't already have it. And I believe that's a skill that has to be developed, and there's specific tactics and strategies that go along with that. So we'll start out with Dan this morning. Dan, there was a point when you started out with your initial business, and I'll talk about when you started going down the path of helping businesses get funding. There was a point when you didn't know how to do that yet, when you had no established track record yet. Can you talk to us a little bit about how did you know when you felt like you were competent enough to be successful in that area, and that was really a viable path for you to go down? And just tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Actually, it started out with trying to recognize the needs of some of the younger entrepreneurs in the area. It was kind of a spinoff from Center for Excellence. After we started this up, we said, we got a space and a place now for entrepreneurs to gather. What else do entrepreneurs need? And over the past 20 years, I saw where a lot of good, especially when I went to Council for Entrepreneur Development, I saw a lot of really highly talented and skilled entrepreneurs struggle with funding to the point where it would stymie their whole venture. They would stop what they were doing and spend about a year and a half just trying to get funding for their venture. And I just said, just that observation said, hey, they really shouldn't have to stop what they're doing in the development to go get funding. So, and over the years, I've had to get funding myself. So I felt like I had some skill and experience in that area. As far as going out and offering it to someone else, I've always approached things not from the standpoint of my skill set or my competence, but my passion and my desire and my purpose to do it. And I've always, I think when I was a kid, my parents used to play that record over and over, but The Little Train That Could. They must have played that for me, because all through my years, I've always been willing to attempt or try something that I'm not necessarily skilled at or know anything about, but I'm willing to dive in with both feet and see if I can make it work or make it happen. And since money is I'd say maybe 60% of startups is what I call bootstrapping. People could start them on their own for 5 or 10K. They can start their own professional services businesses for very little. But if you're going out trying to start a major initiative like a software company or something that's manufactured product, that takes a good bit of resources, maybe 25 to 50 to 100K or plus. And so that requires some time. Most people don't walk around with that in their pocket. So they either need to rely on friends and family, or they need to rely on somebody who believes in their mission or their goal. So I'll attach so anyone that approaches me, I'll attach myself to someone that I believe is serious, dedicated, committed, and is willing to put some skin in the game. And so if you ask me if I'm competent, maybe not necessarily so. Am I successful and am I vigilant at it? Heck yeah, because I'm willing to go out there. Anyone I believe in, I'm willing to go do it with. And the majority of times we're successful at it, just because we both feel strong in it. We have that purpose and passion and belief that we can go do it. We just got to find the right people that agree with us.
All right. Now, Martin, you had shared a couple times during some of these previous episodes that you had set a benchmark for yourself, that when you decide to go into business as a coach, that you were going to have 10 clients, and that was going to be your litmus test or your measuring stick to say you were a legitimate coach. There was a period of time when you didn't have those 10 clients yet, and that's what I really want to focus on here. How did you go about building confidence during that period of time when you were building up those 10 clients and you hadn't met that measuring stick yet?
Well, that's a really good thing. I think I'm a huge advocate of telling people the opposite of often maybe therapy, of honoring your feelings less and your commitments more is a key thing. In that during that process, I realized I needed to have a certain amount of honesty to be able to show up. So I was developing agreements with people, which were either trades where they're buying me lunch or something to get going. And I set up small stages to move forward. And my favorite movie that represents confidence and competence is The Beautiful Mind. And the reason that's a favorite movie, about the gentleman who got the Nobel Peace Prize and was schizophrenic, is that his hallucinations never left. They always were there. He just lost interest in them. And that's, to me, the most realistic way of dealing with the conversations or self-critic inside ourselves that many of us have. I certainly do. I was riddled with it most of my life, with very low confidence. And learning to realize I've got to stop fueling that and distinguish it between awareness of something needs to be developed versus just the conversation of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm inadequate. And you play, for me, I play that, I call it a tennis match with that opponent every single day. There's always something that will hit me, especially being a slower reader and a creative speller, where something will show up and go, you're not enough. And then I just go, okay, am I going to be my commitment, or am I going to be that feeling? And I think that's a key thing. So stages of honesty, but not dumping. The idea of authenticity seems to move to I'm giving myself license to whine. To me, authenticity should be coming from your commitment of who you're committed to being, not from the feelings or whims that you have moment to moment. So with stages, it started to develop. And another piece on it was learning how important the audio aspect of my language was. I don't know where, I think I was studying neurolinguistic programming or something else, where I realized I managed to speak in a way that instilled no confidence. And then I started practicing how to do that more to get control over it. And so changing my language and my speaking helped change my confidence as well.
So that actually, you said a couple of really interesting things in there. I love first of all, the movie A Beautiful Mind was great. I definitely recommend that. But what you said just there about intentionally speaking with no confidence, there's a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He talks about something called paradoxical intention, which is actually setting your intention to do the opposite of what you're actually trying to do. So, and I think it goes along with what you're talking about there.
It's one of the coaching techniques I use to get people control over things, is you practice doing it. Like I'll say, well, how would I mismanage your day in the same way you do? If
Yeah.
if I'm taking you over what you're complaining about, how would I do it? So it's learning, and it's learning. So I started practicing accentuating. One of the common things is the going up on your voice. I think at the end, it's hello, my name's Martin, and I think it is my name, and I'm hoping to help you out. And it's this banter phenomenon. Well, I believe part of that affects you, not just other people, in not having confidence in you. So that's a piece of it. That was when you brought this up, I really looked at what were the stats, because I at 35 really was riddled with no confidence. I mean, wake up every day and it's like, why am I here? And profound lack of confidence. And it was most people often teach this stuff, were born naturally with it or had it given to them. I'm more interested in the person who developed it later in life. And the other piece on this to me is altering my relationship from manically optimistic to there is failure in the world, and separating myself from being failure. And that was a really important piece of there, to me. Overconfidence and over optimism breeds kind of this over accentuated compensating personality that I developed for a while, where I was even more insecure because I didn't allow for like grief and failure and real things in the real world. And that's, to me, part of building confidence. Like Pat would say, fail often and fail fast.
Well, it's kind of like it's easy to be confident when everything's going great.
Yeah.
It's on the days when things are not going well when it really makes
which
a
is the
difference.
tragedy of everyone getting this award for something today. We can't let the person ever have a moment of no confidence, and everything must be manically optimistic. It denies us a humanity. It's very core disrespectful of all aspects of life. So
now back to Danford here for a second. One of the things I want to get into in terms of the area of confidence is when you're trying out a new plan in an unfamiliar area, there are going to come a point when you're starting to question, was this really a good plan at all? Was this a good idea at all? Do I need to just scrap this whole idea? And I think there's a skill and there's a maturity that comes with knowing when it comes time to say, okay, yeah, I really do need to pull the plug on this, or I need to stay the course because I just haven't given it time to work yet, or maybe I need to adjust my approach a little bit. You mentioned a couple things about when you were starting out your fractional executive consulting business, and you said that you initially set out to start this and you sent out 100+ letters to different companies that you bought from a list, and you got one response, and it was somebody that didn't need the services originally. I would imagine that a lot of people, if they had something like that happen, would say, okay, maybe I'm just going to give up on this now. You obviously didn't. You ended up being successful. You pulled through. But the question I have for you is, at times like that, like, and I use that as an example, or another example if you'd rather, how do you weigh in your mind, does this signal that I'm on the wrong track, or is this just a signal that I need to be more persistent?
That's a really great question. And actually the answer to it goes back to my mentor is the one that actually suggested that approach to me, or the idea to me. And he was back when we were doing this, I was in my early 40s. He was in his 60s. So he had been through a lot and seen a lot. And I'd known him for about 2 years before I hired him or asked him to be my mentor. When Bill suggested it to me, I said, this is just an excellent idea. It just made great sense to me, because I put myself in the customer's perspective. If I went into a medium-sized company and saw that there were some facilities or engineering work needed, I knew that I couldn't afford a full-time engineer, which was going for 40 to 50K back in those days. So I would hand the project off to someone that I thought could do it, and it would be extra work for them, like the office manager or somebody that could do it, that I thought might could absorb it. So to get an experienced person to work just 8 hours a day for half the salary of an experienced engineer just made great sense to me. And since Bill had been through so much over so many years and seen so much stuff, I knew that there was an answer to it. So I knew one mailing was the easy step to take. I put the letter together, within a day, I was able to put the letter together, figure out mail merge, and send it out. But obviously, with everything quick and easy, if it's too quick and easy, it's probably not the right answer. But I just knew, I really felt strongly that he had given me some great sound fundamental advice. So that's why I followed through. My follow-up, it was over 200 companies that I sent that letter to. The follow-up was just to focus down to something that I could personally do and control or get involved with. So I focused it down to 32 companies that were actually in the manufacturing business that I was in, which was electronics manufacturing. And then I knew that was my clear target because I understood that business a lot, because that's the exact business I was in. So I personally made calls on those. And over the period of 3 or 4 weeks, I was able to call on 16 of them, about 5 a week. And I actually landed 3 contracts, which got me up to 60% of my corporate revenue. So so it was just that patience and persistence, and actually belief in my mentor that it was a sound, solid idea.
So it sounds like the mentorship, going back to that again, was a really critical component. And kind of we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that sometimes if we don't necessarily have all the perspective we need on our own, having that sounding board to go back to, that was And
following back up on Martin's point about failure, some weeks I would walk into Bill's office and he'd say, "Yeah, go get him Tiger next week, Dan." He said, "I'll pull my rosary out and pray for you," because he wasn't necessarily agreeing with the path I was taking that week. So, but he was a great guy, great mentor.
So, Martin, the other question I had for you is, you had recently started looking into crowdfunding. I know you've done a lot with social media and those things. And when you first started taking a look at crowdfunding, how much knowledge did you have going into that subject, and how much did you feel like you needed to still develop along that line?
This is a perfect example of listening to what the customers need. In the small business centers, I realized that this was a real viable opportunity that might serve a group of my clients. And I realized I didn't have enough knowledge of it to be confident with it. And so that's when I contacted Dan and talked to him and said, "Let's team up and work on it. You be the expert advisor. I love teaching. Let's work together and build this course," which we did. And it's been a really wonderful experience, because that's it. So part of dealing with the lack of confidence was to get a component that gave me the competence. Mm-hmm. So it could be internal and it could be external. Mm-hmm. Teaming up with somebody that complements you and you can make an agreement that works is another way to build up the confidence with it. And so that's example of, I enhance my confidence by bringing an expert on to help me with it, so that I had enough confidence to teach it. And once we got something together and we started helping people and started seeing results, it was good.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun with it, and we've helped a lot of people.
Yep.
Still do.
Now, Dan, one of the things I wanted to make sure we addressed here about confidence, specifically when you're interviewing a business owner. I know you spend a lot of time meeting with business owners that are looking to get funding for their businesses. Some of their businesses are viable, some are not, and that's part of where your role comes in, is to help the investors filter that out and really spend their time meeting with the most fundable businesses, I guess. So the question I have for you is, how important is confidence specifically in terms of making a business viable for funding? Do you meet any cases where there's businesses that have a great business model and a viable plan, but the owner is just not confident enough, and that kills off the chances? Or do you ever see the inverse, where you see something that maybe you wouldn't necessarily be as gung-ho about, but because their confidence was so strong that you might be more inclined to bring them in and introduce them to an investor? Just be interested to hear your perspective on that.
Most serious entrepreneurs are pretty articulate at explaining their vision and their purpose. Most of them that I run into. So, because they're passionate about what they're trying to to the point they're trying to get across, or what their idea is. So most of them that I run into can express it. Some express it very well. They can talk to the compelling story that they have. So confidence is important, but I think that kind of goes with the territory when you're an entrepreneur, that you have a lot of confidence, that you're able to get out and about and talk to people about what you're trying to do. There are a few cases that I have run into where the entrepreneur is the technical guy or gal that has developed the idea, but they're truly an introvert, or they have a hard time expressing themselves. Oftentimes what they do is they'll go out and get themselves a marketing guru, if you will, and a marketing person that can market. The CEO always needs to be able to stand up and express the vision of the company. But as far as someone that can really meet with people on a day-by-day basis, then sometimes it's necessary to bring in a marketing arm. I'll use Steve Jobs as an example. He was not the technical guru, but he was a marketing genius, and he had Steve Wozniak and Mark McCullough right by his side doing all the technical aspects of it. But he was the name and the face of Apple for generations, and he's the one that actually built the company, and because he had all the confidence and he had the marketing skills and the articulation, the ability to do that, and we still follow him today. But he had behind the scenes with the two technical guys that actually helped start developing the products that he was going after. So it is a unique combination of skill sets that's needed. Lots of times, entrepreneur where you're starting out, wear the multiple hats. When I'm looking across it, since I spend a lot of time in both circles, I spend a lot of time with the investors. So they always express to me what they want to see. And I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs. So I'm able to bring that over, carry that over and say, hey, look, these guys will be interested in you because of, or they will not be interested in you unless you can explain this. So that's what I feel like I bring to the table to the entrepreneurs. And yeah, with new entrepreneurs, it is a challenge because they haven't had any experience in that world yet, but they know they need the funding, and if they're serious, then they're coachable and they'll take advice.
And Martin, when you first started teaching social media classes, what I'm curious about is, what was your competence level in terms of the social media platforms you were teaching going into it, and how did you decide that was enough to move forward?
Well, first of all, being in social media, if you have a history of not having confidence, is not a wise move, because it is a world, as I explained, where it's an island changing its terrain all the time with random earthquakes. It is constantly in flux. So if you have a tendency of not having confidence and you want to constantly be able to work on that tendency, it's a great place to be, because I literally will drive 2 hours and all of Facebook changed and all my PowerPoints are wrong and I've got to adapt. And that's why in this question about it, I realized practicing being in front of failure and not being a failure, being in front of conflict and surviving it and growing from it, to me are the grindstones that actually build real confidence. So if you aren't taking enough calculated risk and you aren't going back to what you're committed to, you're not going to build that core confidence. You can't say enough affirmations to make it happen. Now, you got to get on the court. You got to take the calculated risk. And so in social media, it's constantly changing. The way I do it is I have a team of people. The class, we learn things from the class, keeping up online, a team of people I meet in a private hangout once a week where we share ideas on what's changed. And I just gave a presentation where Facebook put on the live streaming, and it happened 2 weeks ago, and I had some family emergencies and I missed it. And I'm in front of a class saying it's not on yet. and 2 people raised their hand. They're in the field and said, yes, it is, to 40 people.
Wow.
And it was like a key major change that occurred, and I missed it. Well, what are you going to do? Either die, burst into tears and leave. I don't know what I'm trying to give some options you do, or start laughing. And so, and I said, this is what I mean of how quickly the field changed. I just missed something critical. So I used it as a teaching moment to show I missed something critical, which adds another component of confidence, is the ability to laugh at yourself.
Well, I think that goes into authenticity there also.
Yeah.
I mean, because the reality is you're never going to be perfectly on top of everything.
No, and you got to own it and then show you're committed to moving forward. And I think that's a key thing. I think real arrogance that wears people down is the best example of overconfidence with a gaping hole of lack of confidence inside. And tragically, it often happens in my culture to the smartest people. It's like, why does he or she have to be such an arrogant SOB? Because they really are smart. And it's amazing how many people that have PhDs or higher, and they're a brilliant person, but their personality is so overbearing that I can't have a conversation with them. They aren't approachable or real. And that's the guarded lack of confidence. It's the gape inside. They haven't worked on that aspect of themselves. And that's, I think, where it comes from. I don't know how you become self-aware of it, because if I said, I know you're really in lack of confidence, their shield would go up even more. But sometimes you have to just move away from them. Anyway.
Now, I've got a couple of questions I wanted to run by both of you. Now, Martin, you've said a lot on this subject. I wanted to hear from Dan on this. Now, for a new entrepreneur that's struggling with self-doubt and doesn't have much confidence, what advice would you have to offer? Or what have you found to be helpful there?
Go get a job. That's the fast, silly answer. The real answer, I think, goes back to, and I'll pull in my good friend Bill Davis, who does 100 Days to Abundance. He has a concept that's introduced in there that's another friend of yours, the Good to Great guy.
Jim Collins.
Collins. He does what's called a hedgehog. The hedgehog being, what are you the best in the world at? In other words, what are you highly skilled at? The next circle is, what are you passionate about? And the next circle is, what is your economic engine? What will people pay you for? So you can actually go online and look this up as far as the hedgehog goes. And Jim Collins has actually personally done a YouTube video on it, where you can go through these 3 major points with yourself. And because you really do need to wrap your head around, like back to Martin's point of, you need to be self-aware. In other words, what are all my skill sets? What are my gifts, talents that I can take to the marketplace today? Because the marketplace is out there, but what's the market? So you have to really spend some time. I think my best suggestion is to get with someone that you know, like, and trust, either a close friend or a mentor or coach, and let them. You can walk through some of this on your own, and if you're forced to, you can do it. And if you have to, you can do it on your own. I'm sure Martin's done it a few times in his life. I know I've had to do it a few times in my life, but after I try to figure it out on my own for a day or 2 or 3, knowing I haven't got all the skill sets, I'll reach out to somebody else that I know has been there, done that, or can help me with this, because I've come to realize I'm not that arrogant guy. I ain't that great, but I've got great friends, and I know people that play in that circle. So I'll go after people that I know, like, and trust. So I would advise someone else to use the Jim Collins video, Good to Great video on the hedgehog concept. Walk through that yourself best you can. Then call someone you know, like, and trust, a friend or a mentor, and help and walk through it with them to get you to where you need to be.
I think there's a point to add to this, that many people's greatest gifts are like breathing to them, so they can't see it themselves.
Right, it's unconscious
so you
confidence.
really need to sometimes listen to what other people say you're good at, and then hone it. It's just like when I did stand-up comedy training. Great point. You listen for which jokes actually get laughs. Those are the ones you fall in love with, not the ones you think are funny, the one the audience says. So same thing here. Yes. You really need to listen to, in confidence, I had to really listen to what other people said I was good at, because I thought that was so obvious that why is that a value? You know, it's like, why is that a value? Because, you know, and that was part of what riddled my confidence, was what I took a year out of my life, I remember, where I decided that I was not competent to evaluate my worth. I had to listen to other people that had something of value about me. And 1 year, and it was really tough. It's just like the person who can't take in acknowledgement, and that's a cloaked arrogance. And you need to break that stuff up in you. It's my favorite quote, Dave, is you know, instead of being yourself, is be anything but yourself. It'll be an upgrade. Because most people's automatic, to use a Heidegger term, thrown self is so small to what they're capable of. They're living in this tiny little box, unless of course they're, you know, an insane narcissist, then they have other problems. They're not going to be watching
even
this
in
show.
that case, that your statement still applies.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And to back Martin's point up, I think that's such an excellent point. There's another local guy here named Scott Wittig who wrote a book called Holy It.
Yeah.
And in that book, his first paragraph, he says, when you walk into a room with 12 of your closest friends, what will they say about you?
Yeah.
And that's the unconscious competence that we, you know, we think we live and breathe. We don't realize or recognize as our true gifts that the good Lord's given us.
Yeah, you know, I want to say one of the things I'm remembering back to this I remember saying to my practice marriage, to my former wife, that you know, I said, you know, everyone says I'm a really good person, but that's of no value. I'm not winning in the corporate world, and I realized I really care about people. You know, I was at a breakfast place, and this girl comes up and says, you know, when you asked me what I wanted to do, I'm a real on the ball young lady. And she goes, well, my mom's wanted me to be on LinkedIn. I've decided, here's what I'm going to do with my life. And this is it. And who would have known I could have been blessed to have an impact like that,
That's
you
right.
know, that's the, you know, and it's like, and I need to just keep doing that, giving it away. And so that's, to me, part of it is finding where it's like I tell people when they're job hunting, where do you provide the highest return on investment? It's funny. It's almost like dehumanizing yourself to look at yourself as a product is how you build confidence, and ask, where do I provide the highest return on investment? And let's get me there and get the resources to get there. And then you get more confidence. It just seems like a paradoxical concept.
Yeah, the last question I have to tie all this together for both of you is, where do you think confidence ultimately comes from?
I would say it comes from to use an old term, Dave, a conversation. It comes from a conversation in our head. It comes from a conversation around us. It comes from the stories that we buy into, the stories we live by. I think part of the microcode of being a human is stories. And so, you know, part of it, I've really worked to what I call rewrite my past. So what happened stays the same, but I worked on upgrading the interpretation of what happened. And that's, to me, that's my answer. Dan?
The first thing that hits me is belief, self-belief. Self-belief comes from faith, also comes from levels of building success, and which means comes from failure. In other words, as a kid, if you failed a lot of times and you've been able to overcome it and be successful, then that helps build confidence. And to me, the belief is it's nothing I can really put my finger on. You can't say 100% this is how it developed, but to me, it's a matter of self-belief, which comes from a strong faith, is I guess my best answer. So it comes from a power of spirit greater than us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, great. I think you've both said a lot that I really appreciate today, and I think has created a lot of value for the audience. And I think really the big takeaway here is that confidence is really a skill unto itself. I think it really doesn't matter how good you are at anything else. Being good at something in and of itself does not make you confident. You have to intentionally decide to cultivate confidence and have disciplined habits and practices consistent with that. Whatever those disciplined habits are, you can try a lot of different things, but I think what a lot of the exercises that you suggested, I'm going to remember if there's one thing I'm going to remember out of this whole episode, it's learning how to intentionally be not confident in my speaking and practice that skill.
Yeah, and have fun with it. It's like, let's see, how could I had a client say, I want you to practice with me of instilling more self-doubt. And they accentuated, they went, oh my God, I'm doing this all the time. I went, okay, let's try something different.
So it's like, I guess we're doing a podcast.
That's right. I think we should. I hope we're good enough for doing this.
Yeah, I hope somebody's going to watch this.
Maybe they will.
Yeah.
Tune in.
All right.
We got more.
So that's it for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And until next week, hopefully you'll take something from this episode that'll allow you to get out there and build some confidence. See you next time.